Hello everyone, I'm Kenshin. Welcome to Talking History. Please take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Also, don't forget to turn on the notification bell. Thank you. Today's historical discussion is about the brutal Battle of Stalingrad. As Russia's invasion of Ukraine enters its third year, Putin's stance has become increasingly untenable. Remembering a report from Agence France-Presse, as the conflict raged on for almost a year, Russian President Putin personally presided over events on February 3 road. The Kremlin, located in the southern city of Volgograd, formerly known as Stalingrad, commemorated the 80th anniversary of the Soviet victory in the Battle of Stalingrad, one of the bloodiest battles of World War II. While celebrating, there was also significant promotion of the Russian military's offensive in Ukraine. The intention behind this is quite clear. As we all know, Russia launched the so-called Special Military Operation against Ukraine in February 2022, aiming to denazify the country. However, during World War II, Ukraine fought alongside the Soviet army against Nazi Germany. So, this excuse is quite feeble. Putin's vigorous promotion is undoubtedly aimed at boosting Russian morale. Now, let's briefly discuss the Battle of Stalingrad. First, let's understand the importance of Stalingrad to the Soviet Union during World War II. Situated on the western bank of the lower Volga River, the city had a pre-war population of approximately 600,000 people. It was a vital port on the inland waterway of the Volga River, as well as a major production area for Soviet grain, oil, and coal. Essentially, it was considered the country's lifeline, especially after Nazi Germany captured Ukraine, further heightening its significance. On June 22, 1941, Hitler led Nazi Germany to launch Operation Barbarossa, tearing up the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact and invading the Soviet Union, sparking the Eastern Front of World War II. However, the initially successful offensive faltered due to a sudden drop in temperature, which not only paralyzed the German war machine but also provided the Soviet Union with a breathing space. By early 1942, both sides were amassing forces, akin to the situation in early 2023 where both Ukraine and Russia awaited an opportune moment. German commanders believed they lacked the strength for a full-scale offensive. Army Chief of Staff General Halder suggested targeting Moscow, but Hitler deemed the objective too obvious. Instead, he opted to concentrate forces on the northern and southern fronts to gain an advantage before the United States entered the European theater. After Hitler issued the war directive on April 5, 1942, the German armed forces reorganized and devised the Summer Southern Campaign Plan, codenamed Operation Blue. Splitting into two groups, Army Group B aimed to advance to Stalingrad after capturing Voronezh upstream on the Don River. However, the Soviet Red Army was prepared, anticipating a major German offensive in both Moscow and the southern regions during the summer. Although most German forces were diverted towards Moscow, at least in this aspect, Hitler's gamble on the direction of attack was correct. On July 4, 1942, the Sevastopol fortress witnessed nearly 100,000 Soviet Red Army soldiers forced to surrender to the German forces, resulting in the fall of Crimea. Following this, I'll delve into this battle later. Meanwhile, in Kharkov, the Soviet Red Army saw around 250,000 troops captured, with losses including 1,249 tanks and 2,026 artillery pieces. This sets the stage for the main event, the Battle of Stalingrad. The victories of the German forces in Crimea and Kharkov depleted the precious reserves of the Soviet Union in one fell swoop. With the southern flank severely weakened, the Germans regained some strategic initiative and occupied advantageous positions for their impending offensive. Subsequently, the German offensive proceeded smoothly, driving the Red Army back by 100,300 kilometers and seizing the fertile regions of the Don River and the Donbass Basin. This was undoubtedly a major failure for the Soviets. However, Hitler's overestimation of his achievements led him to believe that capturing Stalingrad required minimal forces. Consequently, the 4th Panzer Army under Hoth was diverted to support Army Group A. while the Sixth Army's advance slowed down. This decision, coupled with the Soviets' preparation time, sowed the seeds of defeat for the Germans. The Red Army confirmed that the Nazi Germany's target was Stalingrad, thus simplifying their objective: hold the city. Though it sounded simple, even with the withdrawal of some German forces, the Red Army still lacked sufficient strength to defend adequately. Reinforcements were hastily brought in from nearby areas. However, the ratio of forces before the battle favored the Germans on paper, with troops at 1 to 1.2, tanks at 1 to 2, aircraft at 1 to 3.6, and artillery and mortars roughly equal. Despite this, the Germans enjoyed a numerical advantage in terms of manpower. On July 17, 1942, both sides engaged in fierce combat, marking the beginning of a decisive battle. As expected, the Red Army found itself at a clear disadvantage. Frustrated, Stalin issued Order No. 227 on July 28, threatening severe punishment for any soldier who disobeyed orders to leave their combat positions or retreat, emphasizing the absolute prohibition against stepping back, a sentiment reminiscent of Putin's statements. Amidst the German predicament of losing armored strength after diverting forces, their aim to swiftly capture Stalingrad faltered. Facing encirclement, the Soviet Red Army chose to retreat from Rostov on July 28. 2 days later, on July 30, Hitler made a significant decision, stating that the fate of the Caucasus depended on the outcome of Stalingrad. Recognizing the battle's importance, he ordered the transfer of troops from Army Group A to reinforce Army Group B. The 4th Panzer Army under Hoth was reassigned to Army Group B, seemingly wasting time and resources. On August 1, they launched an attack northeast along the Kotelnikovo-Stalingrad railway, swiftly breaching the defenses of the Soviet 51st Army and capturing Mozdok on the same day. Despite seizing Kotelnikovo on August 3, Hoth faced fierce resistance and counterattacks from the Red Army, leading him to abandon the idea of capturing Stalingrad alone and adopt a defensive stance on August 9. Before the siege began, the Axis forces had over 50 divisions, including 13 directly involved in the attack, totaling 170,000 troops. While Stalingrad's defenders had around 120 divisions, they suffered severe manpower shortages, with only over 90,000 soldiers, 1,000 artillery pieces, and 120 tanks. The German assault on September 13 was followed by a northern surprise attack into the city the next day, leading to urban warfare where 80% of residential areas turned into rubble. To counter the German advantage in combined arms operations, the Red Army opted to maintain close frontline positions, denying the Germans the opportunity for indiscriminate artillery bombardment and effectively neutralizing their long-range superiority. In close combat, neither side yielded ground, making it difficult for the German forces to find a winning opportunity. Despite both sides resorting to heavy artillery bombardment, neither gained a significant advantage. However, the Red Army's snipers adeptly utilized the cover of ruins and other terrain, inflicting significant losses on the Germans. One sniper, by November 20, had killed 224 enemies, later becoming the prototype for the protagonist in the Hollywood movie Enemy at the Gates. With Hitler and Stalin considering this area crucial, there was no room for concessions. Both sides subsequently mobilized large reinforcements, leading to varying degrees of illness among commanding officers due to excessive pressure. The extent of Germany's losses by November was substantial. According to Soviet statistics from July to November, the German forces lost nearly 700,000 personnel, over 1,000 tanks, more than 2,000 artillery pieces and mortars, and over 1,400 aircraft in battles along the Don River, Volga River, and at Stalingrad. Understanding that enduring the onslaught wouldn't lead to victory, the Red Army prepared for a counterattack, concentrating a massive force for a heavy blow. At that time, the Red Army comprised 143 divisions with 1.106 million personnel, 15,500 artillery pieces and mortars, 1,463 tanks and assault guns, and 1,350 aircraft. The German Army Group B consisted of 80 divisions and 3 brigades, totaling approximately 1 million personnel, 12,900 artillery pieces, 675 tanks, and 1,216 aircraft. At least on paper, they were evenly matched. The date for the counter-offensive was set: November 19th for the Southwest Front and the Don Front, and November 20th for the Stalingrad Front. The German army was already in a stalemate, but on November 30th, Hitler declared in a public speech that they would never retreat from Stalingrad. He emphasized that the besieged troops must not surrender, forcing Field Marshal Manstein to launch a desperate offensive named Operation Winter Storm on December 12. However, by December 19, Manstein realized that his forces were also surrounded by the Soviet Red Army, leading him to ignore Hitler's orders and instruct Field Marshal Paulus to break out southward to join the 4th Panzer Army. However, Paulus refused, citing a lack of fuel, and missed the last opportunity. Ultimately, fearing Hitler's retribution, thousands of soldiers perished in the harsh cold. When the battle finally ended, 23 senior officers, 2,000 officers below the rank of major, and 91,000 extremely weakened German soldiers were captured, with around 140,000 casualties and only over 30,000 wounded evacuated by air. Paulus became the only German field marshal captured in World War II. Later, only 6,000 prisoners returned to Germany, prompting Paulus and other German generals to issue an anti-Hitler declaration, delivering a resounding blow to Hitler. It wasn't until the end of January 1943 that the German people learned of the tragedy in Stalingrad. On February 18, 1943, Joseph Goebbels, the German Minister of Propaganda, delivered a famous speech in Berlin, urging the German people to embrace the concept of total war, mobilizing all national resources and strength for the fight. In this battle, both sides deployed over 2 million troops, 2,000 tanks, more than 2,300 aircraft, and 25,000 artillery and mortar pieces. Ultimately, over 1 million people died, indicating the extremely heavy toll paid by both sides. It can be said that the Red Army achieved victory at the cost of bloodshed, with battlefield losses far exceeding those of the German army. After the conclusion of the battle, the Soviet forces wrested strategic initiative from the Germans, further enhancing the international prestige of the Soviet Union. By eliminating the main German forces, they significantly weakened the fascist military power. While this battle was decisive militarily, its psychological significance outweighs its military significance.